Hi, everybody. Hey, it's now 8 o'clock on Saturday night, more or less 8 o'clock, and I am here. What I'll talk about this evening is more on the inner life of the job guarantee, or perhaps you prefer to call it the job guarantee redux. I'm not clear, but I see I'm still not showing on the screen, so let me do that. Okay. So there I am. How are you this fine Saturday night? Yes, you thought I was in D.C. I was in D.C. I live only about 40 miles away from there. So I was in D.C., but I left there at roughly 5 o'clock so I could bring you this Saturday night broadcast. Okay. This broadcast is going to be in the way of a dry run of the talk that I'm going to give at our panel, that is the MMT panel at the People's Convergence Conference tomorrow, okay, at 1:30. And so I'm going to talk some more about the job guarantee, and I'm going to flesh out some of my thinking about what the job guarantee world is going to look like to a person who is in the program. So I'm going to show the on-screen updates now. We'll try it anyway. Hi, Joe. What do you know? Just got back from a vaudeville show, right? Okay. Hi, Russell. Hi, James. Hi, Pancho. I don't know why I'm hiding Russell. He should be on there too. Oh, I see. I always forget how this works. It takes me a minute to reorient myself. Thanks for the Hey Yoda. Being a Star Wars fan, I always like that one. Okay, so here's the proposal in outline again. It's a proposal for providing federally financed, locally administered jobs in local communities around the nation at a true living wage with good fringe benefits, including medical benefits and paid vacation, family leave, and sick leave to anyone who wants a job, but providing true full employment and permanent full employment in any kind of economy, and after an initial positive shock to the economy, because the living wage is going to be higher than our current wage, the job guarantee program will provide a continuous brake on inflation, because if you consider the situation where the job guarantee is in place, the private sector has adjusted and has raised its wages above the job guarantee. In that situation, employees who are at the lowest salary come to an employer and say, but give me a raise. Okay, and the employee's appeal is all the more credible because there is a full employment type of situation, then it would be possible for the employer or the manager to say no if the request for a wage increase is too high. For example, if the living wage is $18 an hour and the employee says, okay, I want $24 an hour or I'm going to leave, then it's possible for the employer to respond and to say, well, I think that maybe $20 an hour, okay, is more like it. Maybe you can get $24 in the open market, but since the job guarantee is coming in, okay, at $18, then on that basis alone, I'm not forced to give you the $24 an hour that you're looking for. So in other words, once the system has adjusted the job guarantee living wage, even though it is a living wage, also can serve as a brake on inflation in a crowded economy, in a hot labor market where everybody is fully employed and we have tight full employment. In other words, not something like 5.1% or 5.2% or 4.8% or even 4.3%, but an economy where anyone who wants a full-time job can get one at a living wage. And anyone who wants a part-time job can get one at a living wage per hour as well. So, more benefits of the job guarantee. Well, the details will differ among economists and policy analysts depending upon their proposals for a job guarantee. Now, there are many proposals being generated now. Only some are being generated by the MMT economists and writers. And as one among them, I am reflecting our perspectives here. We don't all entirely agree on everything about the job guarantee, even among ourselves. Some of us might favor $12 an hour, some 15, some 18. What I favor, okay, is 18 at this point, cost adjusted by locality. So the $18 an hour would be, let's say, the average living wage across the United States. In certain regions where the cost of living is lower than the average, it would be lower than that. And in certain areas where it's higher than average, okay, then the living wage would have to be higher in those areas. Now, that, of course, is different than present practice for a minimum wage. That is flat across the country at $7.25 an hour. That's very unjust in a way. $7.25 goes a lot further in the northernmost part of Michigan, okay, in Ironwood, Michigan, for example, than it does in New York City. It's a horse of a different color. Okay, not really comparable. Okay, so generally, MMT economists tend to favor a larger living wage than others, but we don't all favor the same living wage. our notions of living wage then will tend to differ. We are perhaps less fearful of a possible inflationary impact of the job guarantee program, okay, than other economists are. Instead, we view the job guarantee as an automatic stabilizer that after the initial shock of its introduction will maintain full employment and have a deflationary impact on wages, so it also contributes to price stability as well as full employment. These are two major goals, okay, of MMT under public purpose. So, potential benefits coming out of the job guarantee are something MMT writers emphasize a lot. And those include lessening poverty, inequality, having much fewer family breakups, a major reduction in crime rates, major reduction in serious illnesses, premature deaths, suicides, and homicides. Why would all these things go down? Because unemployment and the suffering that comes with it, especially when there's long-term unemployment, results in social disorganization. And these are the symptoms of extreme social disorganization. That is poverty, inequality, family breakups, okay, and all the rest of it. Okay? You can lose your home. You can get seriously ill because you don't take care of yourself. Okay? So, okay, and a further benefit to have a federal job guarantee program would keep the otherwise unemployed socially integrated in society due to the way it would work. And when I get to the inner life of the job guarantee, I will go through that again. So here are some common objections to the job guarantee, which have been surfacing of late. First, there are people who say the job guarantee is a radical proposal because you cannot nationalize a quarter of the labor force without significant but negative effects on productivity and growth. Well, first of all, since we only have an unemployment rate of something like 4.3% right now, then if we instituted the job guarantee right now, 4.3% unemployed is nowhere near a quarter of the labor force. That is, it's nowhere near a quarter of the labor force, okay, unless the estimate of unemployment in 4.3% is wholly inaccurate. For it to be a quarter of the labor force, the real unemployment rate would have to be at roughly 25%. I don't think the people who say this is a radical proposal really believe that it's currently at 25%. And if it was, there'd be an even greater need for the job guarantee. I also wonder why, if we put a quarter of the labor force into a job guarantee program, for the sake of argument, why that would result in negative effects on productivity and growth. As far as I can see, the money people get that they otherwise would not have, that they get from a program, a jobs program that pays a living wage, it seems to me that such a program, especially if it were financed through deficit spending, would have extremely positive effects on growth. For example, if the program would have cost $750 billion a year, which incidentally I don't think it's going to cost, but if it were to cost as much as that, then that contribution of federal money to the private sector might have an effect of more than, it might have a fiscal multiplier of more than 2.5 times. Now, the primary fiscal multiplier would be much smaller than that. It might be like 1.6 or something like that. But there are secondary fiscal multipliers and tertiary fiscal multipliers that we have to take into account also. So the total effect, the total fiscal multiplier might be 2.5 times the $750 billion spent as deficit spending into the private sector. Now that's adding more than $2 trillion to GDP. That is, the economy would grow by at least that amount, because we spent as much as that on the job guarantee. If we were spending $750 billion and we were doing it through deficit spending. And secondly, though we'd be expanding the number, of labor hours by the newly employed people, they would also be getting a living wage. So when you consider what we're spending on them and what the increase in GDP would be, and since we measure productivity as GDP divided by labor hours, it seems to me that it's a mathematical certainty in this instance that our productivity statistics will go up. Now, of course, it may be that the people who make this criticism are not defining productivity in the same way economists do. But according to the general economic definition, there's no way our productivity could go down, at least in terms of the measure we use. So we need to know a little more about this particular argument. So anyway, some of the critics say there are lots of job guarantee proposals, but none have worked enough on details. This is amazing to me because Bill Mitchell has been writing about the details of a job guarantee program for years. And Pavlina Chernyeva has been writing about details of job guarantee programs for years. And Randy Ray has been writing about the details of job guarantee programs for years and years and years and years. I mean, we're talking about people who began writing about the job guarantee program during the decade of the 1990s and who continue to write about it today. There's a whole literature on the details. Anyway, another objection is, well, the program is going to be politically toxic if it's just a welfare check that's given to people along with onerous work requirements. And if it's politically toxic, okay, it's going to be a failure. Well, when we get further into the conditions under which the job guarantee program would be administered, we will see that the work will not be onerous, and of course we'll also see that it's going to be socially valuable work. So in no way is that a welfare check. It's not going to be a welfare check. It's going to be earned income on doing things that are valuable for the community. Many people say it's not necessary now to have a job guarantee because unemployment is 4.3%. But the way MMTers look at the program is that the job guarantee is an automatic stabilizer. So it has to be there all the time to create full employment all the time. So it has no bearing whether the U3 unemployment rate is 4.3% right now or whether it's 15.3% right now. What we're advocating for is good policy for now and for if the crash comes in 1 year or so, or 4 years or 5 years. We want a program that's a source of continuing good for the community and continuing good as a stabilizer for the economy. And further objection, this program comes at a high cost to government and at a high cost to businesses, and many small businesses will shut down. Well, of course, it's clear that those small businesses that haven't been paying a living wage to their workers may indeed have to shut down. But the idea behind the job guarantee is that if someone works for wages at a full-time job in good faith, they should be making a living wage. And no one has the right to exploit them by paying them less than a living wage, especially not in an economy where wages have been systematically suppressed by the government through the Federal Reserve for nearly 40 years now. So, as far as it being a high cost to government is concerned, well, right now, I'm looking at a situation where if savings desires of the population of the United States were at 6% of GDP, and our import desires are also at 60%, okay, of GDP, then there's roughly $2 trillion in policy space for deficit spending right now. We're using about 600 billion of it. So that means that there's 1.4 trillion worth of deficit spending policy space that we are leaving on the table in our quest for deficit reduction and our desire for austerity. So that's what we got. In any case, it's not a cost to government because, as you know, from the MMT point of view, spending is costless to the government. Spending in and of itself is virtually costless to the government. So there we are. So further criticism is, well, there's confusion about the goal of a job guarantee. The question is, would the jobs be BS jobs? Well, I don't know who's confused about the goal of a job guarantee. The goal of a job guarantee is to provide anyone who wants a job with a job at a living hourly wage. And the further goal of the job guarantee program is to introduce an automatic stabilizer into the economy. And so I don't think MMTers are confused about the role of a job guarantee. Now, maybe lots of other people who have jumped on the bandwagon of a job guarantee of late are confused about its goals. But the goals of a job guarantee are very clear in the MMT literature. So in that literature, there is no confusion about the goals of a job guarantee. And we urge that if you support a job guarantee, you do so on the basis of these goals, because these are the ones that are in accord with the public purpose, as we view public purpose. As far as the jobs being BS jobs are concerned, no. They're going to be jobs that, as judged by local communities themselves, will be jobs that are producing, or that are designed to produce, socially valuable outcomes. If the jobs in fact do that, they will not be BS jobs. Well, how would they be generated? We'll get into that later. For now, let's start by looking at the context of an MMT job guarantee program. Let's start with four categories. The government sector, the domestic non-government sector, which includes the private sector producing market-based value. Its outcomes have value as measured by the marketplace. Second sector, the nonprofit sector. Third sector, the social enterprise sector, comprised of social entrepreneurial ventures, social enterprises. There are many social enterprises out there right now. The job guarantee program is likely to produce a lot more. We call social entrepreneurial ventures SEVs for short. Under the job guarantee program, nonprofits and SEVs are going to implement community-based and community-proposed programs. These can be implemented at all phases of the business cycle. And depending on the phase, they would address different levels of unemployment and community need. There would be a bottom-up approach powered by the participants, the communities, and the localities. That approach would fit fiscal policy to people, to communities, and to the needs of both of these categories. So how would that work? Well, it would be a voluntary program and a tangible opportunity for those in forced idleness to actively participate and contribute to the community. The same nonprofits and SEVs that already fulfill local needs would be part of the program. And in addition, we expect that the program is going to create a lot more of the SEVs and maybe more of the nonprofits too, because there'll be a very sizable source of funds that will allow the formation of the SEVs. So the program would follow a federally funded grants-based model. It would be evaluated for effectiveness and performance against various measures such as employment creation, environmental impact, public goods and services produced, community development, physical and human resource creation, renewal, and enhancement. And this list is from Pavlina Cherneva, one of the leading writers on the job guarantee. The job guarantee would fund nonprofits, okay, and SEVs to design projects for public purpose. Unemployment agencies, that is the unemployment offices, can be used, and we envision they would be used, to place people in new nonprofit and social enterprise sector jobs. And later, if they wanted to move out of the job guarantee program, would help them to find the private sector jobs if and when the private sector started to hire again. So the JG program would work countercyclically. That is to say, when there's a recession, the job guarantee program and its funding would expand. And when the recession is over, we anticipate that many of the people who have chosen to work in one of the other sectors will want to move towards, will want to move out of the social value sector and move into the private sector, because the private sector is going to pay more. And especially so when, to get employees, they have to compete with the job guarantee. So, some more on how the program would work. Some social enterprises totally prohibit the distribution of profits, but others allow distribution of profits to a limited extent. Either way, there's not much emphasis on the distribution, okay, of profits in these enterprises. So the result would be that the profit motive is limited in the social value sector. Instead, that sector fosters a sense of social responsibility in social enterprises. Again, what kind of work? Examples: home care work, community clinics, urban fisheries, veteran services, aquaponics, youth mentoring, sustainable agriculture, internship opportunities, training for new skills, renovation and also beautification work, These are some of the areas in which people would work in the job guarantee program. Now, it's important to note that there are new categories of jobs that we can't anticipate yet that would be created by the job guarantee program. We view the nonprofit and social enterprise sectors as engines for creating new jobs delivering social value. We expect the people involved in them, including the job guarantee participants, will think up new enterprises that do valuable things for the public all the time, because they will have an incentive to do so. We cannot now anticipate the jobs that will be created by the private sector. We can say what general trends exist in the private sector, what very large changes are generally going on right now. But we can't say specifically what jobs these processes of change are going to produce. So just as we can't do this in the private sector, we also cannot anticipate new nonprofit and social enterprise sector jobs. It's impossible to know what people are going to invent until they've invented the jobs. But there's no reason to assume that such jobs will not be invented, and every reason to assume that more and more new jobs are going to be invented and then will either leave or stay in the job guarantee program. So what's the inner life? I want to say more about the inner life of an MMT job guarantee program. In each community, there'll be a core team of 5 members to monitor and approve social value job creation projects that are to be implemented by teams. I see the projects as being created using a community of practice design, supplemented with one or more portals, social network analysis, survey, collaboration, and also document and content management tools. I envision training to integrate people into communities and teams, and newsletters and white papers that are used to be designed that would be used to publicize activities and to facilitate integration. Each project would be designed with the assistance of job guarantee participants in order to produce outcomes of social value, working with the job creation core team within the community. When projects are approved by the core team, it will be done only with a plan and a specific case study scenario specifying the impact expected from the intervention of forming a new job guarantee team to pursue certain policies in a particular area. So there would be a case made and measures also specified in order to measure impact, which would be tracked through use of a balanced scorecard. And then the core team would evaluate whether the expected impact has occurred or not. In addition, each project would have a knowledge broker for moderating collaboration threads and coordinating with the community core team and the project teams. So visualize it. Each new participant is going to register for the job guarantee at the former unemployment office, which now becomes the job guarantee office. Job guarantee registrants earn their living wage from the first hour that they register. The job guarantee office will provide training about the structure of the job guarantee program to registrants and provide them access to the employment portal of job guarantee openings and job openings locally and across the United States. The community office would provide community rooms where people can talk to others about how job guarantee processes work and where people can develop social relationships with one another. I sort of view the job guarantee office as a kind of union hall of where people would be able to congregate in order to pass information back and forth, and to make sure that everybody is well informed about the conditions of various job guarantee projects. Computers would be issued to participants who need them. That is, it would be a gift from the job guarantee program. Which would also come with the training necessary to use those computers. Job guarantee registrants can join a project almost immediately, taking a position they think they fit. If nothing fits them, then they can get training from the program in order to learn the skills they need to fill the position they want to fill. If they find nothing they want to do, or if they just prefer, they can join with others to create a new social enterprise embodied in a project. They can develop and submit a proposal for their project to the community core team for evaluation. If the project and its budget are approved, then the community core team submits it to the local government for final approval. If the project is approved, then the federal government provides the funding for the project, except for wages, which are paid directly to project members. Why is that? Because a direct relationship on the financial end between participants and the job guarantee program and the people who are paying them in the federal government would tend to cut down on the fraud that might be involved in the relationship where there is a management that stands between the job guarantee funders and the workers themselves in deciding when and how much to pay people. The job guarantee projects would be carried out under the supervision of the person who's elected by the job guarantee participants to head up the projects. The participants would also decide among themselves who will fill the various roles defined by their new project that they've gotten approved. In this way, all job guarantee participants will be integrated into the program within a certain period of time, or they can voluntarily leave it at any time and either accept a job in another sector or look for other government benefits. So now let's wind it all up. So I see the job guarantee as being organized in a way that will integrate those who want to work at a living wage with a new and honorable job delivering social value to their community, while also providing them with a social world full of opportunities to interact with many other people. They'll be able to choose a job that fits them, to get training for one or in collaboration with others to create a job they like, where they can learn new skills and accomplish things they can be proud of. They can get socialized into working with information technology tools that better fit them to work in teams and to qualify for private sector work if they want to leave the social value world and return to the market value world. While in the social value sector, they can and will produce outcomes that contribute to their community while keeping things together for themselves and their family. Altogether, this seems to me a very happy outcome for the job guarantee participants themselves and also for their communities. It's a win-win situation. Okay, and if you're worried about how much it's going to cost and how we're going to pay for it, and that's really your worry, but other than that, you really favor the kind of job guarantee that I've outlined, then all you have to do is join me, okay, in advocating for the job guarantee to be passed without corresponding tax increases in order to fund it. That's a very important point. If you're really just opposed to the taxation, rather than to the job guarantee itself, then many of us who are very much in favor of the job guarantee would be happy to compromise with you. If you help us to legislate the job guarantee, then collectively we will see together that it is solely funded that it is solely funded by spending without any further accompanying taxation. If there's a deficit of $750 billion a year, we don't think it'll be that large. But as I said, there's 1.4 trillion in policy space that's existing right now. Once you expand the economy by that much and do the multiplier effects, it'll also be true that in the following year, there'll be even more policy space available. So this is a good thing to do deficit spending on. And if you want to join with us in getting the job guarantee, and you require from us that we promise not to do any further taxation in order to support it, and I'm ready to give that promise. Or anyway, people like me who might have influence over how the government performs would be ready to give that promise. So, okay, are there any questions? I guess I took maybe 50 minutes to do that. So in 20 minutes over, I have to get it down to 20 minutes tomorrow. But anyway, I'm prepared to take your questions for as long as you have them. And so Deborah Wilson says, we need the job guarantee here so desperately. And Maureen Haley says, we're watching at a campfire tonight. Oh, by the way, I believe I met Maureen Haley at the People's Convergence Conference. So I hope you're having a great time at the campfire. I'm sorry I had to leave. Stephanie Bell says yes. I wonder whether Stephanie Bell is any relation to Stephanie Bell Kelton. Most probably not. But anyway, Stephanie Bell Kelton knows all there is to know about MMT. So you should learn it too. Mark Fabian says, we need a congressional appropriation for it. Yes, we do, Mark. We very much indeed. So what's a social enterprise venture example? Well, it might be a social enterprise venture to provide certain childcare services to people. Could be a social enterprise venture to provide people a venue to create new art, okay, and new sculpture. And the venture could employ artists. Okay, it could be as well that there might be a venture in certain cities around the country to help people to relocate out of flood zones. That would make a great social enterprise venture. And who would have thought of it before the last few days, right? We can't anticipate the jobs that will be created under the job guarantee program, because what jobs will be created will depend upon the creativity of the local communities across the United States and on the creativity of the social enterprise entrepreneurs. And believe me, that creativity is going to boom in these days of burgeoning artificial intelligence and more sophisticated tools. Yes, someone says, actually Maureen Haley says, the FJG, that is. Well, that's a federal job guarantee, but these days we like to refer to it as the job guarantee because the job involved would not actually be a federal job. It would be a local job paid for by the federal government. So it wouldn't be a federal job in the sense that the people employed by paying them would be working in a federal government agency. They would not be working in such an agency. Gray Lewis suggests there's another venture that might be repairing the homes of low-income seniors as a social enterprise example. Yes, that's a very, very good example. Anybody want to brainstorm some more examples? I think there's a lot of fun in that. So, the idea that there's a problem with figuring out what kinds of jobs will come out of the program is really very, very hard to believe. And it's based on the fact that we can list only certain categories of jobs now. But that it's also true that people are inventing new categories of jobs in the private sector all the time. So why should it be possible for them to invent new categories of jobs in the social value sector as well? Yeah, by the way, in the last 30 or 40 years, new categories of jobs have been defined in the government sector also. So why should the social value sector be exempt from creativity in creation of new jobs that would have some value? In this case, these jobs would just be social value. But because they produce social value, they would be jobs that people can be proud of. And they would be jobs where people would have fun being involved in the social relationships they developed while creating the jobs and while being on the job. And in a situation in which everybody, including the head of the social enterprise venture, would be earning the same living wage, because there are no living wage differentials in this social value sector. This would probably give rise to more collective leadership, to more sharing of responsibility, and more sharing of the social value produced as well. Stephanie Bell points out jobs like this would also produce social learning. Yes, indeed, they would produce social learning. The very process of thinking through the jobs and writing the proposals to get the grants to create these ventures would be a learning experience in the modern economy for people who thus far have been very much isolated from any but the most negative effects of our economy today. Mark Fabian says each community can create for their own needs. In this way, we can totally define or redefine what is work. And hopefully also, we can make work more satisfying and fun than it often is in the private sector. If we do that, then private sector people are going to have to make their jobs pays still more in order to compensate people for the jobs that must be done in the private sector, of which there are many, that aren't much fun. Exactly. Steve Grumbine likes to make the point, and I think it's a very, very good point, that one side effect of the job guarantee program would be to restore mobility to the American population. He cites the case of Flint and points out the Flint residents are getting screwed. And most of them are trapped there with that corrupt state and local government. And they can't go anywhere. One reason why they can't go anywhere is because they're poor. They don't have any money to go anywhere. But part of not having money to go anywhere includes the money you need to get settled in a new job in a new place where you may be basically unskilled. Well, if you can fill a job opening in that nice new place that you'd like to go to, which is in a nice community that you would like to go to, and there's a job opening there, and you see it through the job opening portal that connects you up across the United States, then you can apply for that job. You can apply for that job, and the likelihood is that you will get it. And Jenna Colby says, leaving an economically broken region is next to impossible. It's like escaping quicksand. It is indeed like escaping quicksand. But having a job guarantee across the country would make it much, much easier to go where the community is really a good community to live in, because what would be waiting for the people is a new job in that community at a living wage appropriate to the cost of living in that particular community. In many of the broken communities we have, the cost of living is still high because they're in regions that are more crowded than other regions of the United States. And so even if they have the job guarantee in that region, they can find something they like. The job guarantee living wage might not go as far in their region of the United States as it would in another region of the United States, even with regional cost of living adjustments. Jenna Colby says, yep, that is so huge. And Mark Fabian, right on. Fix your blighted community or lose your tax base forever. This is real people power. Yeah, it is. You can vote with your feet. You could vote with your feet. Let Governor Snyder lose his whole tax base. Is Governor Snyder still there? I guess I haven't been keeping track. Boy, he has been awful. And these people voted for him. Can't believe it. I'm not talking about the Flint people. They didn't vote for him, but many other people in the state of Michigan did. And Gray Lewis remarks, it also allows people to rebuild the communities they live in. Yes, they can, but it also almost forces those communities to rebuild if they want people to stay there. Any more questions or comments? Do we have anybody out there who's opposed to the job guarantee as I have outlined it? Yeah, Governor Scott in Florida is certainly another one. And I agree with Joe Gomez that communities need to rethink their value proposition to their citizens. Yes, they do. There's nobody there who disagrees about the job guarantee? Are you saying you don't think it's a radical program for change that's going to nationalize 25% of the population? Oh, is Scott the Snake out there? I'm getting a thank you from Mark W. Collins. Kai Sexton says we need it now. Yeah. We've always needed it. We've needed it since the New Deal. And we haven't had anything close to it since the New Deal. I think people need to remember and need to study what Franklin Roosevelt did and to find out who he really was. I think the country has forgotten. Once I was rummaging around in an old bookstore, I think it was in Georgetown, here, and I found this book that was written in like 1947 or 48 that recounted what the New Deal and the terms of Roosevelt had done. All the actions and all the activities that were taken. Okay, and then the same person, who perhaps was a Democrat, I don't know, began to recount the various things the Truman administration was doing. And the comparison of Truman to Roosevelt. The author wasn't trying to put a rap on Truman, because he was not Roosevelt. The author was fully aware that Truman was doing a lot of good things, a lot of really good things. But when you looked at the Roosevelt record and you looked at the developing Truman record, it was clear that Truman, who according to historians is ranked up there pretty high among the presidents, somewhere in the rankings, maybe eighth best, okay, in history. But it was clear from the detail of this book that Truman, who's still considered a pretty good president today, was a pygmy compared to Franklin Roosevelt. A pygmy. It was just incredible to read that book. Now, I was familiar with Roosevelt at the time. That is when I encountered this book, which I must have encountered maybe 25 years ago, and I was in my 50s. Okay, but I was born in 1939, so I remember Roosevelt rather vaguely in the form of the radio speeches, okay, that he made during the Second World War, when I was just awakening, to the world around me. And my family thought that Roosevelt was a very, very great man. And so I was always open to learning about what his administration had done. And while I was in school, they were still teaching the history of that. And even when I went to college, but mostly during the 1960s, the memory of the Roosevelt administration was fresh, okay, in everybody's mind. And so I always had a really good impression of the New Deal. I was aware of the many, many achievements and I was aware of the Second Bill of Rights. And I was aware of the sheer volume of activity at the beginning of the New Deal, or through the middle of the New Deal, and how energetic Roosevelt was. But this book, the name of which I forget, I regret I never bought that book. I don't know why. I suppose at the time I thought, oh, I know an awful lot about the Roosevelt administration anyway. But the memory of the case the book made, which I absorbed somewhat from reading it in the bookstore, is still in my mind because it put what I had previously thought into a broader perspective, which I hadn't thought about for a long, long time, okay, by then. So I'm afraid, Kai Sexton, that I don't remember the name of the book. And Kai points out that we need it now. And he's probably right. So I do want to say a few things more about the job guarantee while entertaining any further questions or comments, okay, that you have. Sometimes when outlining MMT, talking about the various things that our knowledge, okay, of MMT can help us to do, we talk about helping us to manage climate change. And we, of course, talk about HR 676, funded with reference to our knowledge, okay, of MMT and what difference that would make in how we funded it. And when we think about those kinds of things and all the various programs, the infrastructure programs, the environmental impact programs, the education programs, the programs to provide a jubilee for student debt, all of these things are much easier to come by when you're contemplating the larger policy space provided by our knowledge, okay, of MMT. But when we talk about the JG, there is often emphasized just the bare details. It's a living wage, the fringe benefits are very good, the vacation benefits are good, paid family leave, paid sick leave. Don't worry, the jobs are going to be good jobs, having good social value, but rarely do the economic proponents of a job guarantee, rarely do they talk about what the day-to-day experience of the people working in the job guarantee program is going to be. I think that kind of discussion, keeping that in mind, is something we need to be having a lot of. And the reason why is because under the job guarantee program, people who go into it can make of it what they will. The program provides an opportunity to organize job environments and the jobs themselves according to the needs of the people who are going to hold those jobs. They will have the opportunities to create their own local environments within which they will perform the jobs. I think that Mark Fabian or someone else said there's an opportunity for utopia here. Well, there's no such thing as utopia. But an existence like that and working conditions that operated in that way would create a very, very different society from the one we are currently experiencing, where so many people are so often alienated from their work. They do it for the paycheck. They do it because they've got families to support. But they keep thinking about their real life outside of work, because in the economy we have now, a lot of the work they do is meaningless repetition and even has negative social value, like work in kicking people off of their health insurance on a minor technicality so the insurance companies won't have to pay the bill. I mean, that's a job where somebody really has to swallow his notions of good and evil in order to do such a job. That can't be enjoyable to any normal person. But those are the kinds of jobs we sometimes get in the private sector. In the social value sector, there wouldn't be any need for those kinds of jobs. Such a great plan, says Mark Fabian, needs to be better defined than just socialism. Yes, I don't see that particularly as socialism. The social value sector will still be relatively small compared to the size of the private sector. The private sector will still probably be a majority of the economy. So, I mean, how would that be socialism? We have to keep in mind that both socialism and capitalism are pure ideal types that do not exist in reality and never have existed in reality. All economies are mixed economies to some extent. So I think that's the point here. I never focus on what is, Mark Fabian gets that, and he says, I get that, Joe, but the opponent's argument will call it socialism. Yeah, they're always throwing the memes at us. How does Bernie handle the memes? He handles them pretty well, I think. He usually gets down there and he says something like, well, here's what I think is good. They say it's socialism. Okay, but I say it's good. See if you agree with me that what I'm suggesting here is good. And then he leaves people to draw their own conclusion. If they like it, and they want to keep calling him a socialist, then pretty soon they're going to have to agree that they're socialists too. Okay, now I think that the majority of things proposed by Bernie and campaigned for by Bernie are things that people think they like now, and that they most probably will like when those things are implemented. He's not just selling the things. We pretty well know that a real Medicare for All program is something people are going to like better. Most people are going to like better than what they have now. If it should happen to be John Conyers' program with no copays and no deductibles and no prescription costs and no dental costs and no psychiatric costs, you betcha they're going to like it better than what they have now. Only those people who don't care about the cost of medical care and who are riding on top of the system now would probably still say, well, I prefer the old system. All right. Notice, however, even though in Medicare for All, the insurance industry gets largely socialized, the providers do not get socialized. They're still private sector. So your medical care is still private sector. So while I think we can't forget about the labels, while we know they're going to call it socialism, and we can't forget that they're going to do that, our reply should always be, here's what we want. Here's what we think is going to be good and is going to work for the American people. Do you agree or do you disagree with that? If you agree with it, I don't care if you call it socialism. Okay? And if you disagree with it, maybe you're calling it socialism because you disagree with it. How are we going to tell whether it's really socialism, okay, unless you tell us what you mean by socialism? Well, Carmen, if we pass a job guarantee, then maybe we can form a social venture in the job guarantee program, and we can all work together. How about that? We can set up an educational venture in which we teach people how to do knowledge management in their personal lives. And then we can learn all about knowledge and contribute that kind of social value to the community. And real progressives, no, I'm sorry. And Mark asks, how about social centrism? Social centricism. What is social centricism? What is social centricism? So I don't know what social centralism is. And Real Progressive says, and I don't know who from Real Progressives is saying that because it's not me, says empire has been demonizing socialism for a long, long time. Yes, it's been demonizing socialism at least since 1917. And maybe before that. Mark says he's just being snarky. Stephanie Bell says, "Oh, a new word, but a good one." Well, Stephanie, we're working hard here to try to make socialism a clean word again. The polls are showing that we're having some success. Okay, among the younger generation, even now, socialism is no longer a dirty word. Not a dirty word among the millennials. Yeah, socially centric. Yeah, nothing wrong with social centrism. Social centricism. Social centricism is certainly not socialism because it's just socially centric. It doesn't involve government ownership, okay, of anything. Oh, by the way, there would not be government ownership of the projects created under the job guarantee. They would be social enterprises without a profit motive that would be owned by the participants in them. They would be funded by the job guarantee programs, but they would not be in the private sector, nor would they be in the government sector. They would be in the social value sector. So since socialism, in the classic definition, has to do with government ownership, they would not be government owned. Jason Betsy points out, I always get a kick out of anti-socialists who are part of a credit union. Yes, especially the anti-socialists who come out of the military and who are members of the Navy Federal Credit Union, which is probably one of the best credit unions in the world. And they love it, of course. They love every minute of it. And, but of course, that's not socialism. And actually, strictly speaking, it's not. I mean, it's not owned by the government. It might be called socialist, but only in an older meaning of socialism that emphasizes cooperative nonprofits. Stephanie Bell says community owned. I guess I don't know who would legally own the social enterprise ventures. There are social enterprise ventures now that are actually owned by their participants. I think where they stand in relation to the profit-making aspects tends to vary across the board. There are some of them that make profits, but that do not distribute the profits. They reinvest them back. Stephanie McIntyre Booker says so many get hung up on semantics while ignoring the social benefits for everyone. And then she admits that she used to. Sometimes semantics are important because they can twist the reality, okay, of things. Okay, but I agree. We always want to look behind the semantics at the reality. That's very important. Carmen Muniz, social sectoralism. Well, you guys might be kidding, but I think you're coming up with some pretty good memes here for this. Communism, nah, too close to Cold War stuff. Yeah, yeah, communism is too close to the old bogeyman. Tell me, is China still communist? Maybe today the only real communist power in the world is Cuba, which is not much of a power, I think. So Mark Collins makes the very polite remark: socialism will soon be the desired policy as capitalism continues to taint itself. That was very politely expressed, Mark. Thank you for your contribution to decorum. I was told by a socialist that in the capitalist country/government, things like Medicaid, etc., are actually welfare capitalism, not socialism. Well, I think that's true in the context, okay, of our government and many of the by West European governments. But it's a more complex question than that because you have to look at the framework of the relationships between the government and the economy within a particular nation to understand whether those relations are actually simply welfare capitalism or whether the entire framework that governs the relationship is somehow more a case of government managing things for the public purpose and preferring having a bias towards the government actually doing things in the economy. In welfare capitalism, there's certainly a bias towards the private sector doing most of the valuable things, even though, of course, it's a much more humane form of capitalism than what we increasingly have in the United States. Now, my own beliefs are really pragmatic in the sense that I think we want to judge things on a case-by-case basis as to whether they should be handled by social enterprise ventures, okay, by SEVs, okay, by bona fide government organizations, or by private sector companies. I guess there are cases where private sector companies do a very good job and do, by and large, benefit the communities. And I'm sure the proponents of private sector ventures and private sector work would have no trouble recounting all the very good things, okay, that Apple has done, okay, for economic life in the United States. And so, in the absence of any need for me to do that sort of thing, I will leave it to the people who are very enthusiastic over what Apple has done. I don't know whether people can see Oh, I think I mistakenly hit I think now I mistakenly hit right on screen updates show. Okay, let's see what happens now if there are on screen updates. Well, somebody said they saw you, Carmen. Oh, it was Mark. And Mark Fabian. Jason Bessie. The welfare state isn't socialism. It's just capitalism with Vaseline. Oh, gee. Phew. Robin says hi. Yeah, Robin Anstedt. Taint capitalism and Vaseline. What are you guys implying? I'm sure only the best, Mark. True pragmatism is humane. Certainly, John Dewey was very humane. And the father of pragmatism, Charles Sanders Peirce, was also humane. And Ralph Barton Perry, a major thinker in the area, value theory, was also humane. Those are pragmatists, though, who emphasize long-run pragmatism, which appears to be very close to our public purpose concept. But the people who invoke the name of pragmatism today, such as our former president, our former presidents before him, our former Democratic presidents before him, practiced a very vulgar kind of degenerate pragmatism, which wasn't pragmatic at all. How do I know? Because what they tried to do didn't solve any of our problems, but made them worse. And that's not pragmatism. It may be pragmatism to say that the perfect is the enemy of the good. But it's not pragmatism when you think that the good is the perfect and that the piece of crap is the good, and that it's pragmatic only in the sense that since it's a piece of crap, you can get it passed. Jason Bessie says if workers aren't controlling the means of production, it's not socialism. It's still capitalism. Well, I find that an interesting phrase. That's certainly the Marxian definition. My problem is, while in Marx's time it might have been clear what it meant, I think at that time, what it meant was the machines, the buildings, the technological know-how, that was all being controlled by the owners, by the capitalists. And in real socialism, the workers have to control that through a government that represents them. However, today, the means of creating things, of value, are very varied, and especially the focus on machines is now only a shadow of what it once was. And so sometimes it's hard to know who controls what. What kinds of things are controlled by government? What kinds of things are controlled by the social enterprise ventures or by the nonprofits? How about when things are owned and controlled by a cooperative? Then do the workers control it? Well, just because it's cooperative doesn't mean that the workers are controlling it. There are cooperatives that have hierarchical management systems. There has been for some time a strong distinction between the ownership of a business and the control over that business. They're no longer synonyms. So even where the workers or the people who began a corporation control a corporation in the sense of having stock ownership, they may still not control the means the corporation uses to produce value, because they may not control the actual operations of the corporation, which may be controlled by a small elite who are not workers, especially in a very Pickwickian sense of the word. Capitalism plus neoliberalism equals corporatism. Capitalism plus democratic socialism equals the highest standard of living in the world. Not so cut and dried as that, I think. Maybe it depends on the mix of capitalism with the democratic socialism. Anyway, I'd like to see more of the mix before I decide finally on the question you raised, Lauren. More of the mixing stuff in reality. On Jason's previous comment, if workers aren't controlling the means of production, it's not socialism, it's still capitalism. Well, if they're not, then according to the classical definition, it's not socialism, all right. But that doesn't really necessarily mean that it's still capitalism. It might be social enterprise ventures of the kind we talked about before. It might be nonprofit ventures. Nonprofit ventures or nonprofit organizations are not capitalists, because only capitalist organizations are incorporate a need for profit and a desire for profits and the drive to make profits, all of which are essential to capitalism for a Marxist or even a quasi-Marxist. I myself am not a Marxist because when I read Marx a long, long time ago, okay, along with a number of other Marxist writers at that time, I had a real problem understanding how we can make the concept of class an operational and measurable concept that we could actually work with in politics in order to design policies. That was my hang up with it. I couldn't see that the kind of Marxian socialism that was around by the middle of the 20th century and late 20th century was applying very well to the real world at all. I found it illuminating sometimes to read some of the Marxist thinkers of that time. But I always thought that that problem of defining class in an operational way was not well solved by them. And the point of Marxism was to be able to say things about class conflict and the evolution, of classes, so that we'd be able to predict what was going to happen to our societies. Anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent. Lauren Hall says, I was referring to the Nordic model of capitalism, Scandinavian countries like Sweden, Denmark, Iceland, etc. Yeah, I was actually thinking of them too, because when we talk about them, there are many people who think that they are socialists, simply not capitalists at all. I don't agree with that. They are mixed economies with a very good admixture of socialism, more than is true in most other countries. And by and large, over a period of time, that has made them happier places to live in, with some exceptions in certain years. Like there was one time, long ago, I think now, where Sweden had the highest suicide rate in the world, barring perhaps Japan at that time, where suicide was in the fabric of their culture. But now the statistics have gone the other way, and I think that suicide rates in Scandinavia are now lower than they are in the United States. Anyway, at that time, the conservatives were trying to blame the suicide rates on socialism in the Scandinavian countries. Stephanie asks, wouldn't true pragmatism be cooperation by all for the betterment of all? Instead, we're told what's best for us by the few. It doesn't feel best at all. I think that from the point of view, of pragmatism, you have certain goals in mind, and then you do things to achieve long-term goals that produce the best outcome for people. So I think true pragmatism is really long-run pragmatism that takes all kinds of things into account, and that has a very complex value theory, which is rather circular. In other words, in true pragmatism, there was no such thing, as intrinsic value. there were only lots of means ends chains. And then maybe a quite general and abstract concept of the good somewhere down the line. So the ethical theories were just very complicated systems, okay, of means and ends. I remember reading value theories written by pragmatists. I was very much into this in the 1970s when I was trying my best to develop the foundations for value science. And among the most intriguing of the value theorists were the pragmatists. Where I eventually ended up in my search for value theory was kind of a synthesis between a non-natural value theorist called E.W. Hall, who is little known today, but who was a professor at North Carolina back in the 60s, and who wrote some very, very good academic books on value theory. It was a cross between he and Karl Popper's thinking on how we arrive at knowledge. It made a very interesting synthesis, which I can tell you about sometime, but it doesn't seem like it's relevant to this particular group. Okay, Carmen has a question. What's the question, Carmen? Okay, we seem to be running down on questions here. So I assume there are no more questions about the job guarantee to be asked. And therefore, I think that we're nearly through with our broadcast for tonight. So I'd like to thank you all. I have very much enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed all your comments and your questions. And I very much enjoyed trying to give you a deeper insight into them. Carmen is now saying above, and that is a little mysterious to me. I'm seeing Carmen's above comment above. And Russell Gallman is now thanking me, and Stephanie Booker as well. Well, thank you for coming and for spending your Saturday nights with me. Okay, I enjoy them very much. So, until next Saturday, or until my next stream sometime in the middle of the week, I bid you good night and have a wonderful rest of the weekend. And don't forget, Stephen Ellis will most probably be on tomorrow evening with their usual bang-up session. So goodbye for now, and good night.